I knew my marriage was over when my husband suggested that I sleep with his friend for £800,000 a night. Does he even love me? My husband, Aaron, and I met up with one of his friends, Julian, who had just returned from the UK. We were all hanging out at a trendy, slightly too loud spot in downtown Seattle. The atmosphere was convivial, almost electric, the way it is when someone rolls back into town flashing wealth and excitement. Julian, a venture capitalist who'd been living between London and Geneva, was definitely flashing it. We were all laughing, swapping stories, and having a genuinely good time when his friend mentioned that he wanted Aaron to help him find an escort to keep him company in his hotel room, a luxurious suite at the Fairmont, offering to pay £800,000 for the night. I remember thinking, £800,000, that's more than our house. Not long after, we were back in our old, creaky, three-bedroom house in the suburbs. The laughter was gone, replaced by the crushing silence of our financial stress. Aaron had been nursing a beer, staring blankly at the wall. When he turned to me, his eyes were cold, calculating, and devoid of any warmth. He suggested that I should be the one to stay with his friend, that I would get a share of the money. I was completely heartbroken. It wasn't just the suggestion. It was the clinical, detached way he said it, as if he were discussing a business transaction, not offering up his wife. At that moment, it hit me like a physical blow that my husband might never have truly loved me. Hello, everyone. I'm just going to keep this raw today. I'm Sarah Edward. I'm 34 years old, and I used to be an elementary school teacher before everything started spinning out of control. I'm streaming this from my attic office in Tacoma, Washington, where I've hidden from the world for the last 2 days. I look back at that night, and the first thought that rushes through my mind every single time is, where was the outrage? Where was the protective instinct, the love, the respect? Aaron, my husband, the father of my children, looked at me and saw nothing but an asset he could trade for a payoff. It was the ultimate betrayal, the kind that redefines everything you thought was real. We'd been together for 10 years. Our lives, up until recently, had been a comfortable, if slightly predictable, sequence of career goals and PTA meetings. But the last year had been a descent into a financial nightmare. We were going through severe financial struggles. Aaron's construction business had hit a wall with a major lawsuit, and everything we had was tied up in it. The bills were overwhelming. Our 2 kids, 10-year-old Olivia and 8-year-old Mark, were home for the summer, not by choice, but because we couldn't afford their school fees for the next semester. Every day, the shame of that reality gnawed at me. After I first refused Aaron's proposition, a refusal he met with utter shock, as if I were insane to turn down a fortune, he started giving me the silent treatment. He didn't yell. He just became a ghost in our own home, his disapproval a suffocating blanket. He would walk past me without a word, eat dinner in silence, and stay up late watching sports, punishing me with his emotional absence. It was the sight of Olivia sitting on the porch, sketching sadly because she couldn't join her friends at summer camp, and the sheer terror of knowing the power would be shut off any day that finally broke me. The desperation was a living, breathing thing inside me. I had to choose between my dignity and my children's future. It was an impossible choice, and yet there it was, stark and unavoidable. I spent an agonizing week in deep thought and prayer. I tried to reason with myself. It's just one night. It's money for a service, not love. It's a solution to the problem Aaron created. The rationalizations were thin, pathetic excuses against the weight of my conscience. but the pressure of the debt was simply too heavy to bear. Knowing I'm sharing this awful journey with others makes me feel marginally less alone, even as I hate myself for the decision I made. I walked into the garage where Aaron was tinkering with a broken lawnmower. "I'll do it," I said, my voice flat, empty of emotion. "For the kids, for the debt. But you owe me, Aaron. You owe me my soul." His face lit up with a sickening mixture of relief and avarice. "Sarah, you won't regret this. It's just a transaction. It changes nothing between us," he promised, already reaching for his phone to call Julian. He had found the quick fix he needed, and he didn't care about the cost to me. My husband organized everything. He handled the contact, the logistics, and the negotiation for the payment split. I didn't want to know the details. I just wanted it over. The arrangement was clinical. I was to meet Julian at his hotel room the following evening. The hours leading up to it were the worst of my life. I felt physically ill, a blend of revulsion and sheer dread. I tried to focus on the numbers. 800,000 pounds, roughly 1 million USD. A significant portion of that would wipe out our debt and secure the kids' schooling for years. I was sacrificing one night for years of peace. That was the mantra I clung to. I remember stepping into the hotel room. It was overwhelmingly luxurious, smelling of expensive cologne and fear. Julian was kind. Too kind, which made it all worse. He didn't treat me like an object. He treated me like a broken, beautiful thing he had purchased for a brief, awful moment. He knew I wasn't an escort, and the pity in his eyes was almost harder to bear than contempt would have been. And then we did it. The next morning, I walked out of that hotel feeling hollowed out, carrying the weight of the night on my shoulders, but also a cashier's check that represented our freedom. When I got home, Aaron was waiting, agitated and excited. He barely looked at me. He only looked at the check. We received the money, which, even after the split, was enough to be life-changing. We immediately settled most of our debts, paid the property taxes that had been threatening foreclosure, and the greatest relief of all, our children returned to school the following week. For a while, a fragile peace and stability returned to our home. Aaron was charming again, relieved of the financial pressure. He treated me with a newfound respect, or at least a quiet gratitude. He seemed to genuinely believe that we had solved our problem and could simply resume our lives. But for me, the transaction was a scar, a constant, ugly reminder of the night my husband sold me, and the moment I sold myself for the sake of our family. I tried to bury the trauma, but the memory of Julian and the kindness in his eyes lingered in my subconscious, like a low, persistent fever. I started praying again, desperately seeking forgiveness for an act I committed out of the kind of desperation that only a mother can understand. I thought I had paid the price for our financial peace. I thought the nightmare was over. I was terribly, devastatingly wrong. The true consequences of that night were only just beginning to unfold. The false calm we bought with that check lasted for exactly 2 months. It was the calm before the ultimate storm, the silence before the detonation. Aaron and I were functioning again, playing the roles of husband and wife for the children. But a chasm had opened between us. We lived in the same house, but occupied different emotional continents. He was a man who had sold his wife and then expected her to forget the transaction. I was a woman who was slowly, silently dying inside, unable to reconcile the cost of my children's happiness with my own ruined dignity. Then came the morning I stared at the faint pink lines on the pregnancy test. I felt a cold dread settle in my bones. I hadn't been careful. In the chaos and emotional detachment of that night with Julian, I hadn't insisted on protection. He had, in fact, brushed off the suggestion, saying something smooth about trust and natural connection, which, at the time, felt less clinical than the transaction I was there for. Now here was the consequence, undeniable and terrifying. 2 months later, I discovered I was pregnant. When I eventually mustered the courage to tell Aaron, he was in the kitchen, casually scrolling through investment properties. I simply said, "I'm pregnant." He froze, his thumb still on the screen. He looked up, and the look in his eyes was instant, raw suspicion. Not joy, not even shock, just the immediate, crushing realization that his calculated solution had created an even bigger problem. How? Who? His voice was low, harsh. "I don't know who the father is, Aaron," I admitted, my voice trembling. "It could be yours, or it could be Julian's." It was a stressful time. I was giving him an out, a plausible way to claim ownership and maintain the fragile illusion we had rebuilt. But Aaron wasn't interested in saving face. He was interested in control. "Did you use protection with Julian?" The question hung in the air, a final, damning judgment. I told him I wasn't sure. The shame burned my cheeks. He insisted against it. "It was part of the night, Aaron. The night you arranged." That didn't matter to him. All the pent-up guilt and self-loathing he should have felt for prostituting his own wife was instantly projected onto me, onto the unborn child. My husband's attitude changed again. He went from relieved provider to accusatory judge in a single breath. "I won't accept it," he stated, standing rigid, fists clenched. "I will not raise another man's child. You will get rid of it. If it's not mine, it doesn't enter this family." He said he wouldn't accept the baby unless it was his. Strong. "I am not going to terminate the pregnancy, Aaron," I replied, finding a quiet strength I hadn't known I possessed. The moment I felt that flutter of new life, something shifted. This wasn't a mistake. It was a human being. A miracle conceived in the darkest corner of my life. I had already sacrificed enough. I would not sacrifice this child. The ensuing weeks were a blur of threats, pleas, and explosive arguments. He pushed for abortion, citing our financial recovery and the stability of our existing family. I held firm, my maternal instinct overriding all fear. Eventually, exhausted by the conflict, and perhaps fearful that my refusal would lead me to expose his own role in the conception, we reconciled. It was a tense, conditional truce. He agreed to wait, to hope the child was his. But his resentment was a palpable, corrosive force in our home. The definitive proof came with an amniocentesis test, a grim necessity demanded by Aaron to satisfy his controlling curiosity. When the results came back, confirming the terrible truth, he wasn't shocked, but rather vindicated in his cold assessment of my guilt. Later, we found out the child belonged to his friend. Aaron's rage was quiet and menacing. "You see, Sarah, you brought this filth into our lives. You will get rid of it." "No," I said, looking down at my growing belly. "This baby stays. I choose to keep this child. I choose life." I chose to keep the baby, despite my husband's threats. His control was finally broken. The money had bought me stability, and that stability bought me the courage to defy him. The marriage, however, was now truly over, held together only by the inertia of our shared history and the pretense we maintained for Olivia and Mark. The atmosphere in the house became suffocating. Aaron was like a human pressure cooker, pacing, plotting, his anger radiating off him in waves. He avoided me, avoided even Mark, the son he still believed was his, preferring to spend hours behind his locked office door. He focused his attention obsessively on our daughter, Olivia, spending every free moment showering her with gifts and exclusive attention, drawing her into his dark circle of resentment. One rainy Tuesday night, it happened. I had been up late, trying to work on a business plan for a small online venture, my first attempt at financial independence. When I realized the house was too quiet, Mark was asleep, But Olivia's room was empty. Her favorite backpack was gone. I raced to Aaron's office. The door was ajar. His desk was bare. His computer, his passport, and a single suitcase were missing. My blood ran cold. I frantically called his cell phone, which went straight to voicemail. I called his work number. Disconnected. Out of nowhere, my husband took our daughter and disappeared. I went straight to the phone, shaking so violently I could barely dial the emergency services. My husband, he's taken my daughter. I think she's been kidnapped. The police arrived quickly, but the devastation was doubled when they began their inquiry. They reviewed our marriage status, the recent financial troubles, and my current pregnancy. An hour later, the officer informed me, his voice carefully neutral, that there was no criminal kidnapping. Aaron was Olivia's legal father. He had simply left the marital home with his child. I went to the police, thinking she had been kidnapped, only to discover he left willingly with her. It was an act of calculated malice. He had taken the one child he felt was truly his, leaving me alone with my 2 sons, my pregnancy, and the ruins of my life. I was devastated. I was already 7 months pregnant, emotionally broken, and now half of my world, my beautiful, sweet daughter, was gone, snatched by a spiteful man. I launched a desperate, frantic search. I spent days on the phone, contacting every single one of his family and friends, trying to find any clue, any hint of where he might have gone. His parents claimed ignorance. His business partners were evasive. And the collective silence of his entire network was deafening. No one knew where he was, or, if they did, they were protecting him. Aaron had vanished, taking my daughter and leaving me isolated and without recourse. My world was imploding. Pregnant and emotionally broken, I reached out to his friend, the father of my unborn child, for help. It was the last desperate act of a terrified woman. I didn't call him for comfort or love. I called him because he was a man of immense resources, and crucially, he was connected to this new, terrible chapter of my life. Julian answered immediately. I recounted the whole nightmare. The pregnancy, the paternity, Aaron's threats, and the sudden, devastating disappearance of Olivia. I could hear the shock and profound anger in his voice. "Sarah, stop," he said, cutting through my panicked sobs. "I am coming back to Seattle right now. Don't worry about anything. I will handle this." Julian's response was immediate and overwhelming. Within 12 hours, 2 very large, professional men arrived at my house. They were former military personnel, now part of Julian's private security detail. He sent security guards to protect me, ensuring I was safe from any further threats Aaron might pose, and to watch over Mark. Julian himself arrived 2 days later. He didn't come as a friend or a lover. He came as a man taking responsibility. He was horrified by what Aaron had done, not just to me, but to the children. He visited regularly, supported me financially, and helped me look for my husband, though without success. He put his security and investigative resources into finding Aaron and Olivia, tapping into networks I could never access. He paid for a new phone, ensured our utility bills were not just paid, but prepaid for a year, and handled the fees for Mark's school, allowing him to focus on his studies rather than our domestic crisis. He was a pillar of stability I desperately needed, a man who, despite his immense wealth, was grounding and genuinely kind. He was there for every doctor's appointment, every panic attack, standing firm against the storm Aaron had unleashed. I was no longer just the mother of his unborn child. Julian was acting like a partner, a protector. He saw my vulnerability and responded with loyalty and strength. The contrast between his immediate, selfless support and Aaron's cold, calculated cruelty couldn't have been starker. Julian was repairing the damage that Aaron had caused, not just financially, but to my very sense of worth. I realized then that my future, and the future of all my children, lay not in the ruined marriage I had tried to save, but in the new, unexpected family that was forming around me. The final 2 months of my pregnancy felt like an extended period of suspended animation. Julian became my anchor. He was consistently present, a steady force against the emotional wreckage left by Aaron. He was respectful of my space, understanding that our connection was born out of crisis, yet he was utterly devoted to the life growing inside me. He brought Mark to basketball games, helped him with his homework, and treated him with the easy affection of a beloved uncle, never once suggesting that the child's paternity mattered. He had already accepted my son Toby as part of his family, and that gave me the secure foundation I needed to face the future. The day I gave birth was the start of a beautiful new beginning. Months passed, and I eventually gave birth to a healthy baby boy. We named him Jude, which means praised. Julian was there, holding my hand, the first to hold our son. Seeing profound emotion on his face as he looked at Jude, the son he hadn't planned for but fiercely adored, was all the validation I needed. This man was truly my partner. His father, my husband's friend, was there for me, acting like a father to the child and a partner to me. Julian quickly moved from his hotel suite to a separate guest apartment in the same building as my rental, ensuring he was close enough to be an active, daily father to Jude and a present figure for Mark, but still respecting the legal boundaries of my separation from Aaron. He was financially generous, not with a controlling hand, but with genuine care, ensuring that I could focus entirely on healing and motherhood without the anxiety of the bills Aaron had weaponized. Julian was the steady, reliable man I had always craved, and my children were thriving under his calm, loving attention. Mark considered Julian his new favorite person, and Jude's entire world revolved around his deep, gentle voice. The pain of Olivia's absence was a constant ache, but with Julian's investigators still tirelessly searching, I held on to hope. Then, one cold afternoon, after a year of complete disappearance, my life was upended again. I was in the kitchen, preparing dinner, when I heard the front door creak open. Standing in the foyer, looking completely out of place against the backdrop of our calm, organized life, was Aaron. He looked terrible. His clothes were rumpled, and his eyes, the same eyes that had once held such cold calculation, were now hollowed out and filled with a desperate, defeated exhaustion. He was clutching Olivia's hand. Olivia looked pale and reserved, but seeing her was like a light turning back on in my soul. I dropped the knife and ran to her, sweeping her up in a tight, shaking hug. She clung to me, her small body trembling with residual fear and relief. Aaron watched us, his posture defeated. He hadn't come back in triumph or anger. He had crawled back, broken by the immense, grinding reality of being a single father on the run. "Sarah," he rasped, his voice rough, "I beg you, take me back." He confessed that he'd tried to live with his mistress and the child he had fathered outside our marriage, but that relationship had been a disaster. He had spent the last year moving from state to state, trying to run a business while caring for a young child, and he had failed spectacularly. His money had dried up, his mistress had left him, and the stress of caring for Olivia and his other child had completely overwhelmed him. He realized that the comfortable, stable life he had hated was the only life he could truly manage. He was begging for the easy way out. He wanted his housewife back. I held Olivia tightly and looked at the man who had abandoned us. "Aaron, look around you," I said, my voice steady, no longer trembling with fear or desperation, but with quiet resolve. "The debt is paid. The kids are happy. And I am not the woman you left." But by then, I had moved on. His friend and I were together, raising our son. I introduced him to Julian, who stepped out from the living room, Jude asleep against his chest in a carrier. Julian's presence was calm and commanding, a stark counterpoint to Aaron's ragged desperation. Aaron instantly devolved into predictable fury. My husband refused to accept the situation and accused me of infidelity. "Infidelity?" Aaron shouted, the old anger flickering in his eyes. He pointed a shaking finger at Julian. "You let this man into our home? You slept with him after I left? You cheated on me?" I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Cheated on you? Aaron, you seem to have forgotten how this started. You sold me to him. You literally sold me for £800,000. Called his lawyer. He documented Aaron's appearance, his admission of running away, and the safe return of Olivia. Aaron was served with immediate legal papers. The rest was handled by the legal system, which this time was on my side. Given Aaron's year-long abandonment of the marital home, his confirmed disappearance with Olivia, his initial proposition, and the clear documentation of his financial and emotional abuse, the court moved quickly. There was no marriage to salvage. It was a commercial arrangement dissolved under duress. Eventually, our marriage was annulled. The custody arrangement was the final hurdle. The court recognized the bond Julian had formed with Jude and Mark. It also recognized Aaron's demonstrated instability and lack of resources during his time on the run. I was granted primary physical custody of all 3 children. Aaron, despite his desperate fight to regain full control of Olivia, was granted shared joint custody of our daughter. But the arrangement was structured to prioritize Olivia's stability and emotional well-being, which meant a staggered schedule and mandated co-parenting therapy. He was forced to accept a settlement that was far less generous than what he would have received had he been a decent human being. His empire crumbled entirely. The final piece of the puzzle was the house. I couldn't bear to stay in the home where I had been betrayed, where I had sold my soul, and where my daughter had been taken from me. Julian understood completely. He handled the sale of the old house, and a month after the annulment was finalized, he presented me with the keys to a beautiful sunlit colonial house in a much nicer neighborhood outside of Seattle. The deed was in my name, signed and secured. I moved into a new home, a house bought in my name by my new partner. It was his final, powerful statement of trust and commitment. He gave me back my independence and my financial security, legally binding it to me, not to him. We didn't rush into marriage. We didn't need a piece of paper to validate the family we had built. We were Julian and Sarah, a team, raising 4 children, Olivia, Mark, Jude, and Julian's young son from a previous brief relationship, who was a frequent and welcome visitor. I transitioned fully into my social commentary and advocacy work online, using my platform to share my story, not just as a cautionary tale, but as proof that survival is always an option. I spoke openly about financial coercion, marital abuse, and the resilience of a mother's love. I was finally using my voice, not just to confess, but to empower. I look at my life now, the noisy, chaotic joy of 4 children, the deep, abiding love of a partner who respects my mind and my heart, and the sheer, intoxicating freedom of being beholden to no one. My marriage to Aaron ended the moment he saw me as a commodity. My life began the moment I realized my worth was priceless. Julian saw my desperation and responded with rescue. Aaron saw it and responded with exploitation. The journey was traumatic, filled with agonizing choices and unbelievable betrayal. But in the end, Aaron's greatest act of cruelty, his decision to sell me for money, was the very thing that led me to the man who would genuinely love and protect me and my children. It was the darkest transaction that bought me the brightest future. It's a story too wild for fiction, but it's the truth of my life. And I know, because of the responses I get every single day, that my story, however painful, helps others find their own strength to walk away from a toxic or abusive situation. And let me tell you, if you think this story of greed and betrayal is shocking, you haven't seen anything yet. The initial rush of freedom and the joy of having Olivia back settled into a profound, enduring peace. The new house, bought entirely in my name, wasn't just a place to live. It was a physical manifestation of my hard-won independence. It was a space I controlled, a foundation I could trust. Julian had insisted on this detail, my legal ownership, not as a gift, but as a restoration of the power Aaron had systematically stripped away. We established a rigorous, loving routine that centered on the children. Olivia, initially withdrawn and guarded after her year on the run, slowly began to thaw. She found a deep connection with Jude, her little brother, and bonded quickly with Julian, who never pushed her, but simply offered a steady, trustworthy presence. Mark, who had carried the silent burden of our financial strife, flourished in the new, secure environment, his grades improving and his natural cheerfulness returning. My own emotional recovery was a longer, more complex journey. The trauma of the transaction didn't vanish, but its edges softened. I stopped seeing myself as a victim who had been sold, and started seeing myself as a fierce survivor who had done the unspeakable to protect her children. Julian helped me frame it this way. He never pitied me. He admired my courage. He understood that my act of desperation was the ultimate proof of a mother's loyalty. Our shared parenthood of Jude was a constant, tangible reminder that something beautiful could emerge from the deepest despair. We officially became engaged a year after the annulment, a quiet, joyful affirmation of our commitment. We didn't need the grand gestures. We needed permanence. We chose to focus on building our life together, merging our finances, our schedules, and our hearts, ensuring the 4 children felt completely secure in their blended, unconventional family. Aaron remained in Seattle, adhering grudgingly to the joint custody agreement for Olivia. His supervised time was limited, and his attempts to poison Olivia against Julian and me were met with firm boundaries and the evidence of our stable home. He had lost the power to hurt me, and in losing control, he became a marginal figure in our lives. The tables had completely turned. He was the one dealing with the consequences of his actions, while I was building a future of true abundance. Not just wealth, but love, stability, and integrity. My vlog and social media presence became my calling. I used the money from my divorce settlement and the income from my online work to start a small nonprofit focused on helping women escape financially coercive relationships. My story, once my deepest secret, was now my greatest asset. It was a testament to the fact that even when you are forced to make the most horrifying choices, redemption is possible, and a true family can be found in the most unexpected places. I was no longer a housewife. I was an advocate, a partner, and a proud mother of 4. I was finally, truly free. Click on the next story waiting for you on screen. Because trust me, the betrayals only get darker from here.